Hello, good evening, Matilde. How are you?
Hello.
Is everything okay?
I'm good, thank you.
Great, good to know. Let's please continue working. We have to finish one lesson, cover one more that is a very short one as they usually are, and then we go back to the TOEFL practice. Okay, so before we go back, I want to know, please, what do you remember about the topic that we were covering together? Remember that we're missing. Give me a second. I'm going to. Okay, we were talking about adjective clauses or relative clauses, right? And we were missing just the last part that it's the using whose and being even more clear about whom. But what do you remember about what we did in the last class? Let me know.
Yeah, so we saw some relative clauses like which, that, who, and well, we were about to yeah, go even further with whom. And yeah, there are clauses that help us to connect, yeah, two ideas. And yeah, well, I could say that for now.
All right, good. Some questions over there because I believe that's clear. What about who and whom, right? We were going to go on again, right, see a little bit more about it. But what do you remember about the difference between those two? When do we use who in adjective clauses and when do we use whom? What's like the condition to use whom?
Yeah, I remember it was about the subject and the object. So when, yeah, I think when it's after, I mean, when it's, yeah, when it's the object, I'm supposed to use whom.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, 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 okay, yeah, that's what I remember.
Good. And it would be right, directly related. So if it's the subject, then it has to be who, right? So yes. So subject, who, object, whom, right? And it works not just for this. Again, this knowledge is very important, Matilde, because the logic that you're using here can be used to formulate questions with whom, right? Because when you use who in questions, not every time who is the best option to ask the question, right? For example, who did this or whom did you call to, right? Or did you call? So those questions are different because in one question, right, you're using who as the subject, right? Who did this or who was in the party? In that case, in that question, who is my subject? And one more time, if it's not your subject, then you must use whom, right? Whom did you call? Or whom, right, did you see even? Whom did you see last night? Right? So again, in that case, it's very useful because we know how to formulate those different questions. All right. And it's not going to happen with what or with which, because if you analyze what happens with what, it's always the same. Right? What happened? In that case, what is the subject? Happened is the verb. But if you ask, what did you do? In that case, what is the object? But it doesn't change, right? So we don't notice when we have subjects or objects with what, with which, because it's the same, right? But we notice when it's with a person because it is different. All right. So again, asking the same question like, who did you see last night is still correct. But if you say, whom did you see last night, it is going to be better, right? More precise and more formal. So let's then go back to the part in which we were, which was this one over here. And we're going to work one more thing with whom. I mean, it's what we already did, but we're going to try to apply different verbs so that we use different prepositions because we also have a rule for prepositions. I don't know if you remember something about it, Matilde. What do we do when we have a preposition after the main verb we use in the adjective clause?
Mm, what do I use after the clause?
Yeah, correct. That's one possible place, right? Remember, we have two correct places. One can be formal and the other one can be very formal. So what are the two positions, the two places in which you can use the preposition?
Yeah, okay. So right after or at the end? Right after it would be more formal, and if it's at the end, informal.
Yes, exactly. Huh? Both cases, right? Or in both cases, it is formal to use the preposition before the adjective clause or after the verb in the adjective clause, right? So it's usually, sorry, going to be at the end. But actually, it depends because if you are using an adjective clause in the middle of one idea, it is not going to be at the end of everything, right? But it is going to be at the end of the main verb that is part of the adjective clause, right? So let's give an example of that actually. Yes, let's say something. Um, we're going to try to think. You're going to help me, please. Matilde, I'm going to go to our document. This is the one. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to write here. So we need to think now of one idea that contains a general, very general noun in the middle of that idea. So that in order to give information about that general noun, we need to separate the main sentence to put the adjective clause in the middle and continue with the rest of the sentence. All right, for example, we can say this. We can use this as subject. So you can say, the man, right, was looking at the car. Okay, so here we have two elements, but we are going to give more information about the man. Okay, here, this is our main idea. Now, to use whom also we're going to use the man as object in the second part, right? So you give me this one, please, Matilda. What sentence can you give me in which the man is the object of that sentence?
Okay. That the man, or yeah.
Yeah, but in that case, right, remember, the man has to be the object, so it has to be after the verb. So any simple idea, because after that we're going to combine the two of them, but right now only a simple idea in which the man is after the verb.
Okay. So if I say, I mean it's not after. I mean, the man looking at the car is his best friend.
And that one, but it would be good. But again, it's working as subject, and again, it's great. But now, in order to use whom, we can use that. But yeah, actually, no, it's going to be the same idea. Let's try to use it as an object. What could it be? Anything in which we have the man as the object of that idea.
Okay. Every time I think of an example, it's always a subject.
Give some ideas. Then you can give me perhaps another one. Let's say, for example, look, we can be very simple. We can say just this. We saw that man last night. Okay, so this is one example. we're still part of that sentence, but the man is the object of this idea. All right? Or you can say something like, my sister, right, danced with that, right? Or again, we can be very specific and we can say with the man, right? In order to be clear that we're talking about that detail. But let's remember that our second idea is only going to be something that is going to help us formulate the complete adjective clause, right? But again, in these two examples, we have the man as the object. Sorry, I have a mistake over there. As the object of our idea. Right here is sister. Okay, my sister danced with the man, or we saw the man. In both cases, it is the object, right? So it means that now formulating the adjective clause, we have to use whom to be very formal. But mainly what I was trying to show you is that one thing that is important to know is that the adjective clause has to be always next to the thing that it is describing, right? So this extra information is about the man, right? So it has to be just right next to it. We cannot put it after the entire sentence, right? So the result, it is going to be any of these. Let's start with this, right? Copy, and now we paste this in the middle, but of course we make the changes that we have to make. So the man, right? Here we can say whom we saw, right? Of course, we don't say the man again. Last night was looking at the car. So in this case over here, this is the adjective clause. And again, what I was trying to show also here is that in case, in the second part, we're going to see that. But in case we have a preposition, it's not always going to be at the end of everything, right? If we had a preposition in this case, it would be here, right? So we can say then that the rule is that the preposition can be before the adjective clause or after the verb that has that preposition, right? And it's going to happen in the second example over here, right? So instead of that, we say this. Okay, actually, let's leave that over there. Okay, now here is where we have these two possibilities, right? That one that is correct, or the other one that you mentioned is, sorry, this one over here. And of course, it is only an alternative. No, there you go, right? So this is what we were saying. And here we have the two possibilities, right? Before the adjective clause or after the verb, right? Which is using the preposition, and then you continue with the rest of the sentence. But again, this is only going to happen if you have other complement words or if you have the rest of the sentence because it was divided. Now, we're going to learn some rules afterwards, but one very common is when we're using this type of adjective clause, we don't use commas, all right? Because this information is necessary to identify the man. But when it's something unique and we know what we're talking about, we have to use commas, right? In this case, we don't need it. For this part of the adjective clause in this lesson, we don't need it, okay? So I wanted to show that so that we can also practice now with this type of idea, Matilde. I don't know if you have any questions about what we did here, so that now you can have your own two ideas, and in this case, we are only going to use whom, all right? And it can work in the two ways. It's not obligatory, but you can use the main element that is general as the subject or as the object, okay? And here again, this is going to change how you're going to organize your main information. Why? Because the second idea that you give is only going to complement details about it. All right, so the most important idea that you give is always the first idea because again, it determines how you organize your whole sentence. But that's it. I don't know if you have questions again before I give you the time to work with two examples. Let me know, please.
No, no questions. But I mean, it has to be an object, right? Because I have to practice with whom.
Exactly. The second one has to be an object, but the first one can be a
Well,
subject or an object, so that you can change and play. And if you can, let's do please one in which the first idea is a subject, and the second one in which the first idea is an object, but the second idea is always going to be an object because we have to use whom, as you said.
Okay.
All right, good. Let's do it then, please. Here, let's go to this document. Actually, I'm going to share. I'm here, so I'm sharing the link. Okay, there you go. So let's do it, please. And again, in this time, we have to use again the three parts, please. The first idea, the second idea, and the combination. All right, so let's work with that process in the two examples. We're going to have 4 minutes to 5 minutes. If you finish before, let me know, please, Martin.
Okay. Good.
Good.
Sorry, I didn't ask. Should I make this three, the main sentence, the second one, and the final mixed
Yes,
sentence?
yes, please. Let's follow all those steps to understand why we're using certain structure. So yes,
Okay.
please. Okay, so we're about to be there. Let me know how you're doing, please, Matilde, if you need some extra time to finish.
Yeah, I'm finishing the last idea.
Okay, so let's finish that one then, please. You're ready when you're ready.
Okay.
Good, so it seems that you have it. So let's replace those two ideas, everything, all right? The first idea, the second one, and the combination of both.
Okay. The first one, the woman was looking at me in a weird way. I remember the woman from the university. The woman whom I remember from the university was looking at me in a weird way. And he's such a talented artist. He's my new colleague. The man who is a talented artist is my new colleague.
Great, thank you very much. Again, it seems to be great. All right, we know that we can use right some prepositions in different places. Actually, no, in this case, we don't need to apply that rule because we don't have it, but only have one observation in both cases. Remember what I was mentioning? We are only going to use commas if this is extra information. If we don't use commas, we are not going to use it, not even at the end of the clause. All right, so we have two options. If we use comma, we cannot use only one over there. We have to use one over there as well. Okay, always surrounding the clause. If not, that's going to be a grammatical mistake. And how do you decide? Usually, you don't use commas for general nouns that need that information to be clear. So in this case, as you can consider that you need this, that's why commas are not necessary. But actually, they're optional. If you believe that this is extra information and it's not important, you can set the commas, but always again at the beginning and when the adjective clause is finished, right? If not, we then don't use them even over here because if not, you are dividing the subject because in this case, this is the complete subject and this is the verb, right? And we cannot separate the subject from the verb. That's why we're not going to do that again, unless we have parenthetical commas here and here. But that will be it. The same over here. All right, it applies the same. If we have commas, it will be before who and after artist. If not, we leave them over there. But that everything else seems to be great. I have no observations. I don't know if you have any questions before going to the next part that is using whose to finish the lesson. Let me know, please.
No, just an observation. Maybe while I was writing from, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, you said it, you have said it, yeah, a second ago, but it doesn't apply the rule for to this preposition, right?
Yes, yes. Are you still talking about? It's not clear to me. What are you referring to now, Matilde? Are you talking about the prepositions?
Yes,
Okay,
for
yes.
the first example.
It only applies if the preposition is before the object that is the main noun that we are referring to, right? So if this from
Mm-hmm.
was or were from the woman, then we can apply the rule. But in this case, the preposition from is just for the university, and the university is not the main noun that we are referring to. Okay, so that's why that preposition is just like an extra complement, but we don't take that into account. All
Okay.
right, only again if that preposition is the object of the noun that is the main noun that we are talking about. All right, so good. Let's go then to the last part, that it is going to be a whose. So you have the example there. So only scanning Matilde, and perhaps you've used this before. It's not here. Here, what can you tell me about whose? You have again the example. You can scan it. You tell me what you know about it. This is another adjective clause, but it has a very specific detail. So what do you say?
If I'm not wrong, it's more related to, yeah, as a belonging.
Yes, it is correct. It's related to belonging, to possession. Very good. And with just by looking at it, how can you explain how we use this adjective clause? What do we need to use this, right? Because we need that belonging, but how do you see the connection, or how do you see the connection between the first idea and the second idea and the result of both?
I mean, you mean how it's supposed to be structured, the sentence?
Yes, exactly. What are the steps that you should follow? Perhaps they are the same as the ones you have above, but what is the detail that you can recognize that makes this special? And again, the structure that you need to make it.
Well, whose is right after the subject, and after the clause is directly the thing I'm referring to. I mean, in this case, is Paul.
Correct. Now, if I ask you, just in the first two ideas, in what idea do we have the owner of that possession, and in what idea do we have the possession itself? What do you say?
The owner, it would be the first part. I mean, that's the dog.
Mhm.
And the possession, it will be the paw.
Exactly correct. So in the structure, you can say, and we can say in general, that first we have to place the owner, then we have to show information about that owner. And remember, the owner is again very general, not specific, right? We're saying the dog. I don't know what dog you're talking about. So to give more information about the dog, in this case, you have to show a possession of that dog, right? If you don't show possession, you cannot use whose, right? You can use the other adjective clauses that we know, right? But to use whose, you need a possession of that general element that you're showing at the beginning. And it can be an object, it can be an animal, it can be a person, it can be anything. Because whose works with everything as long as you're talking about the possession of that thing or that person or that animal. All right. And of course, again, as you were saying, it's going to be, in this case, perhaps not the subject, but we have the noun, right? The noun that is unclear. So you have the noun, the unclear noun, that is the owner. You have whose, that is telling us that we're going to mention a possession of this general noun. And you have the possession of the noun itself. And then, of course, the rest of the idea, right? So owner, whose, possession. The same here, right? Owner, possession. So that will be it. Again, it's important to take that into account so that our structure is correct. So let's try to practice here this directly. Matilde, I don't know if you have any questions about it so that we can go to the practice. Let me know, please.
I don't think so.
Okay, so let's go, please.
Yep.
The same logic, the three elements, right? First sentence, second sentence, and the combination. And two examples, please, just as you did a few minutes ago.
Okay.
Good. So we check, please, again in 4 minutes. you let me know.
I have a question.
Yes, let me know, please, Matilde. What's your question?
So I'm trying to say in the example that, I mean, that, that's my mother's jewelry, the jewelry that was lost, but but I think the first idea should be more general because I am already saying that it's her belonging.
Yes, actually, it's going to be even simpler, right? Because in the first idea, you don't show possession, you only show the
Yeah.
owner, right? And remember, but something important here, because here it is going to be with a slight change in terms of punctuation. If you say my mother, that's too specific, right? And again, it's good, but remember that here we're working with very, very general details.
All right.
So you can say something more general, but again, the idea is good. It can be, right? That's my mother, then my mother's jewelry, and you give me ideas about it, and then you give me the idea with whose, which is good. But in that case, we're going to need commas or some details over there, okay? Which is not bad. But in order to practice with this logic of this lesson, we have, you can change instead of my mother, You can mention a girl in a general way, right? That's the girl. That's even right the engineer, which is going to be a girl in this case. Anything but a little bit more general. But yes, answering to that, just the owner in the first part without the possession. The possession only in the second part, and making very clear that it is the possession of the previous person that you mentioned.
Okay, good.
All right, good, very good. Now you're welcome. And also, as part of this challenge, please, this is the first one,
Yes, it's the
Matilde.
first. Mhm.
Let's make the second one, please, with an object. Try to, it's the same, it's exactly the same, but try to work an example with an object. All right, so you mentioned first an object, and
Mhm.
even though you are going to mention a part of that object, it is going to be considered a possession. For example, if you talk about the legs of a table, right? You can give that's the table, and you say the table's legs, right, are broken, something like that, and you give the idea, right? That's the table whose legs are broken. Okay, so anything that comes to your mind that is related to an object, or it can be also an animal if you want. All right, so the first one is good with this. The second one, it can be an object or an animal. So let's continue, please.
Okay.
Okay, so let's be finishing, please, those last ideas so that we can check. I'm going there as soon as you're ready. Please let's read what you got, Matilde.
Okay, I have another question here. Um, yeah, in this case, I mean, the verb that I chose for painting, I don't think it actually worked with whose. So maybe it could be better if I choose, I don't know, the painting belonged to instead of painted by.
Yes, because in that case, remember the order. To make this work, the first idea has to contain the owner. But in this case, the
Mm.
painting is not the owner of Ricardo, right? So what you can do to make this work, first you have to mention Ricardo A, and then you can say that it's his painting. And then the second part is going to be easier, right? Because you're going to say that's Ricardo whose painting is being showed off and I don't know where, right? So it has to be in that way because if you first
Mhm.
mention painting, you have to mention a part of that painting, but you're not
Okay.
mentioning a part of that painting, right? You are showing the owner or the creator of that painting,
Right.
right? So that's not going to be possible over here. Okay, so once again, you have to show first the owner and
Mm.
then the part of the belonging of that owner. All right, so again, here to make this quick and to make this work, you can say, right, there is, and here you mention first this person, right? Or you can change that part to that's Ricardo, something like that. Okay, that. But again, here, of course, this is very specific, so it is going to be different, right? We were going to need punctuation marks. So in order not to need them, perhaps again, this is just to practice. We're going to change that again to, okay, the artist. Okay, that's the artist. And here you can say something like, right, um, right, that the artist's painting is in that museum. Okay, something like that. Again, just for practicing. So what we're doing here is, again, first always the owner, then the possession of the owner with some extra information, and then you complement, and the result of that should be again, right? That's the artist whose painting is in that museum. All
Mhm.
right, so again, and the example they were giving going to be as long as it had the right order to place whose, remember, always in between first the owner and second the part of or the possession of that owner. All right, and the result again would be what we said. Okay, that's the artist whose, right, painting is in that museum, right? That will be the final combination of this idea. And again, we always have this logic, right?
Mhm.
Owner whose possession. So let's read then please the first idea that you wrote, Matilde, and also the second one to analyze the structure that it has.
Okay. That is a girl. The girl's jewelry was lost. That is a girl whose jewelry was lost. That's the artist. The artist's painting is in that museum. That's the artist whose painting is in that museum.
Very good. Now, again, just to give the example that we were asking for, how can we think of the part of an object? We can make this very
Yeah.
easy. Again, we're going to say, for example, that's the car, right? And you say the car's tire is flat. Okay, a very common example. So first, the owner in this case is the car. Then if I'm going to mention a part of the car, it has to be, right, one of the elements that compose that car. In this case, I'm talking about the tire, right? So here I can say, once again, right, that's the car whose tire is flat. Okay, anything that comes to you in this way is going to be or has to be in this order. Of course, you can make it more complex, but the structure is going to remain the same. All right, so once again, owner, part,
Yeah.
and combination. Yes, tell me, Matilde.
Now, I was thinking of the second example. For example, if I say, I mean, like I was saying, like I was trying to say before, I mean, there is a painting. Well, if I put it just in one sentence, like there is a painting whose quality was ruined because of the moist.
Yes, perfect. Exactly. By saying a part, it can also be a characteristic that it has, right? Anything that is a possession can be an abstract characteristic or simply a description that it has, and it's considered a possession as well. So, yes, it is going to be very good. You can talk about the quality, you can talk about elements that you see or that you don't see, as long as they belong to that thing or that person, right? And again, it can be abstract or something very concrete. So that example works very good, Matilde.
Okay, good.
Okay, good. Great. There you go. So that was whose. Okay, we spent some extra time over here, but it is important again, right? Remember that the main things that we have to do here are covering these lessons and they have to be clear. I believe that now everything is in order and clear, but let me know if you have any questions, please, to finish the lesson, Matilde.
No, it's clear now.
Okay, there you go. Now, please, we're going to take advantage because actually we're working pretty good with the contents. As always, we're finishing everything before time. So let's take these minutes that we have to at least practice with one question for the TOEFL task that we're practicing. All right, to agree or disagree with something. So I'm going to just to make it quick. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to go to that element. I'm going to share the question with you, and you know what we have to do, right? Remember that we're still looking for the best strategy, and you know that it can be a combination, as we said, right? A combination of an interesting fact about it and a good example about it.
Okay.
We got to see that it's possible to give more emphasis to one element. But again, my advice and the advice of people who have taken the TOEFL to ensure that you're going to have a good score is to always try to look for a balance, right, between the two reasons that you develop. Even though you show different elements to support those two reasons, it is always a good idea again to look for a balance. All right, if you again give too much emphasis to one element, it's again, right, going to be considered as something that was not very well organized. But that's it, okay? That being said, we know the structure, we know what we can take into account. So I'm going to share the question with you. Please give me a minute.
Okay. I'm not completely sure, but I think I uploaded one example and we didn't check it, but I'm not sure if I'm confusing with a previous class.
Yes, I believe you're right. We're going to take a look also at that. Give me a second, and I'm going to verify that everything is, well, received the feedback. But anyway, I'm also going to look for the question so that we can work with that as well.
Okay.
So you have the question in the chat. As I'm looking for your recording to verify we gave the feedback for that one or not, be thinking please of the possible response that you can give to that one. Okay, it says, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? It is better for children to have teachers who are young, even if they are inexperienced. All right, so you have to show again agreement or disagreement with that idea. Okay, now before I give you the real time to answer that, yes, we have one here that we didn't check. So let's give a general feedback to see how this is going. Remember, little by little, we're just going to pay attention to very big elements because I believe that we have the details. Is only trying to accommodate, trying to fit all those elements that we got to make this a balanced, organized, and clear response. All right, so let's pay attention to what you got over here.
Okay. I completely agree with the statement for the following reasons. First of all,
Good. Again, right? Little by little, I'm not going to say anything about certain parts. I'm just going to reinforce this, that I believe that again, the introduction is over there, right? Remember, and once you feel comfortable with one part of the structure that you got, you can practice using different elements or words just if because you're going to need to give different responses to different questions. So again, once you feel comfortable, you can try to look for synonyms or the other details, as long as again it's not going to affect the time or is going to make you use way more time than the one that you're using now. All right, because again, I feel that this part is already good in terms of the introduction. Now let's go to the first reason.
helping with the chores in the house at a young age teach children responsibility and discipline.
Okay, right? This is something that we mentioned. I believe, I'm not sure, this is the second one, right? The second time that we recorded about this topic. I believe that it was the case, right? Because I remember the idea over there, right, about a
Yeah,
teacher, right? The conjugation of that one. So I believe that we checked this one. But anyway, let's
yeah.
listen to verify.
It has been proven in cultures like
Yes,
Japan
right?
that.
This is the one.
Yeah, we heard that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay, yes. So
Yeah.
it means that we have the structure, but anyway, let's just listen to everything just to verify some details.
The childrens are being taught the cleaning habitudes. They the long term they have integrated this in their daily lives. And second of all, I would say that this kind of burden that cleaning the house, there's a lot of things to do, and in my case, sharing these chores with everyone, it's helpful for every single person.
Good, right? So we have the elements that we mentioned. So let's remember once again what we have to take into account, right? So again, looking for balance, giving more specific details, going straight to the point in that case, but mentioning things, right, that are going to be like very hard to I mean, in terms of, remember, the idea of this part of this practice is to convince the listener, right, the examiner, that you're right. So if you give ideas again that are hard to set a counter argument against, if you set ideas that are very clear so that you say, okay, yes, I mean, that's clear. It is going to be, again, a good element to have in your favor, right? So again, to have an interesting, convincing, and persuasive fact, and to show an example that shows your experience, but that really shows you there, right, as part of that experience, that's always going to be a good element to have. All right, so with that into account, let's take these minutes again until 10:20 at least. You have the question in the chat, so I'm going to read it for you one more time. It says, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? It is better for children to have teachers who are young, even if they are inexperienced, right? They don't have the experience to do it. So let's have 1 minute, please, to organize our ideas. Then we record our response. Okay, so 1 minute, please. All right, so we have that minute. So let me read this again. This is the idea, right? It is better for children to have teachers who are young, even if they are inexperienced. Let's try to show agreement or disagreement, and let's remember the elements that we mentioned before this. So are you ready? Let me know, please, Matilde, so I can start with the timer as soon as you start.
I am. Okay.
Good. So let's do it, please. All right, there you go. So as you're uploading this, please, we're going to first give well, some feedback for what you've done. Then we're going to read and listen to the response that they have in the web page. And with that, we have the practice for today. Okay, so let me know, please, when you have it here.
It should be there now.
Yes, I see it over there. Okay, so let's take a listen to this.
I completely agree with the statement for the following reasons. The first reason is because unexperienced teachers shouldn't be an issue because well instructed people, teachers, can handle a class, and the only way to gain experience for a young teacher is, yeah, for him to have, for him to be or her given the opportunity to teach in the first place. So for those reasons, and second, young people have
All right.
different.
So over there we have an interesting argument, right? But again, perhaps we're still using a lot of time because we're starting with the second part, but it's already second 35, right? So again, it's little by little noticing, being aware of this, and we're going to have points of reference. And with you, we're going to do that because we're in this part of the structure. We're going to try to set just one mark in which, even though we didn't finish the first element, we're going to make us and force us to stop over there. Again, just for the practice, right? That's not something you're going to do in the TOEFL. But right now, okay, so that you stop and then you start with the second idea. All right, even though you didn't finish with the first one, because again, you have something interesting in the first part, but I believe we're not going to have the same right amount of time to give also very strong ideas for the second one. But anyway, let's listen to the second part.
Perspectives, and they can connect to young people easier than older people. I myself, I am a young facilitator, and it's easier for me to connect to young
Okay,
people.
good. And again, right, the second reason is, I think it can be very strong, right? The first one is right, and I believe it's also really interesting, talking about the opportunity, right? And the only way, of course, for them, sorry, to gain experience is by working, right? And they have to work. So I believe that's good. And even the second one can be a very interesting one because, again, if you analyze just by listening to your response, you can feel that even the second part can be stronger and more convincing because it feels more personal, right? But in this case, even though it's very strong, you give it right too little time. I believe that if you have the time to develop more about the second idea, using some adjectives about your experience working right as someone that teaches being young, I believe that can be even better than giving extra time to the first idea, right? So all in all, again, we're in the same element, but we're going to try to use strategies, not now, of course, starting tomorrow, having a very specific limit of time in which you're going to stop, even though you didn't finish, so that you have that reference every time. All right, and so it's not going to be a general reference. We're going to divide now our time with certain markers and highlighters so that everything is even better for us to be even better organized. So that's it. I don't know. Actually, let's go before you can tell me any comments. Matilde, I have this over here. So you have the response over here, and let's listen as we read it, please.
I think it's better for students to have young teachers, even if they're a little bit inexperienced. First of all, young teachers can relate more to their students. They simply have a lot more in common with them in terms of personal interests and pop culture awareness. As a result, it's easier for them to connect the classroom material to the real lives of the students. This can encourage kids to stay motivated and keep on task for their whole school day. Secondly, younger teachers have a lot more energy. Class sizes are huge now. In fact, they're probably bigger than ever before. This can create trouble for older teachers who might run out of energy and not be able to finish their lessons if they have a huge group of students.
Good. Now, if you take a look, one of these elements actually is are similar to the one that you mentioned in the second part, in terms of the connection that you can have or young teachers can have with their students. And in the second part, we have a different element, right? The energy. That also, of course, it is an interesting element to show, but of course, it depends how you show it. In this example here, we don't have an example like in terms of experience of this person, right? That's why, again, it feels good. But once again, I encourage you to compare your answer, your second part of the answer, with the first part over here. And again, everyone is going to tell you that if you give a personal experience, it feels like stronger. All right. And it's always going to be more interesting if you are involved over there. All right, but that's it. I don't know what questions or comments you have, please, Matilda. Let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed the same thing. In the first idea, I could have been more concise, and yeah, and that way I would have more time for the second idea. Yeah, and actually, I had more ideas for the second one, so yeah, I need to balance better the time.
Exactly, right? And you could have structured something very interesting over there, and perhaps that was going to be the main point out of your two reasons. Because it's always going to be like that. Sometimes they are going to feel like the same, but in most of the cases, one of the two ideas that you're given, one of them is always going to be more appealing, catchy, and interesting, right? And perhaps that's the one, right, on which the examiner is going to put some emphasis, and it's going to write to make him say, okay, yes, that's convincing. But that's it then. Let's take that into account once again. Tomorrow we're going to set those timelines. All right. I believe that it is going to be second 25, because as I'm seeing in the time that you're taking for your introduction, it's not going to be longer than 6 to 7 seconds, but I believe 5 to 6 is the time, the average that you're using. So that being the case, we are using 5 more seconds for the first idea. So if it was second 30 before, or 25, then now it's going to be either 25 or 20. And in that time, we should start with the second element. And again, the first practice is just going to be to stop. It doesn't matter we didn't finish the first part, just that so that we get used to seeing that number and thinking of the second idea already, right? That's just going to be like reinforcing, right? In a very like behaviorism, right? Using that type of line, but it is going to be effective, I believe. I don't know, again, if you have any final questions before finishing today, Matilda, let me know, please.
No questions.
All right. So please, we have two polls for today. This is the daily poll, plus one that is showing that actually we're already in the fourth class. That is the meter or satisfaction poll, that you have it over here. Okay, so there you go. Thanks again for being here. Have a good night. I hope you get better because you're sick. So get better soon, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye bye.